This is Performance Delivered, Insider Secrets for Digital Marketing Success with Steffen Horst.
Welcome back to Performance Delivered, Insider Secrets to Marketing Success, the podcast where we explore the strategies, trends, and technologies driving today's marketing results. I'm your host, Steffen Horst, and today we're back with part 2 of our first episode on how AI is redefining paid search strategy. Here with me again are my 2 incredible guests. First, Navah Hopkins, a marketing strategist who has led digital growth initiatives for both startups and global brands. We had her on the podcast before, where we talked about how to grow small businesses through digital marketing. Make sure to check those episodes out as well. She currently works at Microsoft, where she collects and disseminates feedback from the advertising community to the product team, as well as shares accessible insights on new Microsoft ad features. Joining her is Sean Walker, a performance marketing expert with deep experience in navigating platform changes, evolving bid strategies, and integrating AI into campaign planning. Sean is the Chief Strategy and Media Officer at Symphonic Digital. Together, we'll explore how AI is redefining paid search strategy, what's truly disruptive, and what's just adding efficiency. Now, in the first episode, we talked about what trends in AI are truly disruptive or disrupting paid search versus just adding efficiency. Whether the shift to AI-first campaign management is inevitable or just trendy, and what do the next 12 to 24 months look like for search advertisers as platforms evolve? Make sure to check the first episode out too. Now, let's dive into part 2 on how AI is redefining paid search strategy. So for new campaigns, all brands starting fresh, AI offers an opportunity to build strategies in a completely different way. But should brands start planning with AI in mind from day one? Sean?
Yeah, I think there's some parameters you need to think about before deciding. Productivity-wise, yes, definitely pull in AI. It'll help you send emails, edit your case studies, anything that you need. It just speeds it up. But as far as launching AI-based campaigns, things like that, if you're a small client and you don't get enough conversions, you really have to consider if something that requires data to be effective is going to work for you. And I will say we've had some challenges in retail. That's a big one, where let's say the price of your goods is $20 or $30 and it's $5 to $10 a click. You're not going to get enough clicks in order to get a sale. So you really have to sit there and say, how much budget do I need to get that statistical significance? And if we can't get it, maybe we need to consider doing a manual campaign or thinking about other platforms or different tactics, things like that. And I also want to say one thing to go along with this is if everyone is doing the same thing and you have advertiser A and advertiser B, and they have very similar offerings, and they're both using AI dynamic creative, scraping their website, building keywords, and everything is one for one, who wins, right? This is an auction-based model to where if you're just bidding each other up all the time, what is the thing that is going to help you win at the end of the day? And I think more importantly than just thinking AI first is how do you differentiate your brand, right? A lot of AI is going back to retail, a lot of things are commodities. You're selling the same thing, but do you have a different brand approach? Is it a different lifestyle? Do you have brand ambassadors, things like that? I think people need to think that way and think of a more robust marketing strategy and then start thinking, how do we roll this out? And can we use different things in AI to help us get the job done? But I think you need to start off with more of a brainstorm of who is our brand? What is our waterfall for getting leads or sales? And do we have enough budget to achieve what we're trying to do? And then once you answer these questions, then make some smart decisions based off of that.
I fully agree. No notes. In terms of account creation or campaign creation, There is a certain degree of privilege that older accounts are going to have because they'll have that statistical significance. They'll have those older conversions. It will be easier for them to lean into AI, but ironically, they'll be less likely to because they'll have those beautiful account structures that they don't want to necessarily move away from, or it's taking a risk to set up new AI campaigns. So it's kind of like a chicken and an egg situation. For what it's worth, I tend to push if you're brand new, test AI in your B level market and prove out your PPC knowledge in account building and kind of manual with your tier A. And then you can gradually move the AI components that are working well into that tier A mix. I'm not going to repeat all of the brilliant points Sean made. Fully agree with every single one of them, especially around points of differentiation. But there is something to also be said for being where your competitors are not. So I'm not going to shamelessly plug Microsoft as where people are not, although we do actually have over 1 billion people that interface with our screens globally. But what I will say is that I think the average person defaults to Google search first or to Facebook's Meta or Instagram's Meta first. That tends to be the default. And I would take this opportunity in the AI first world to really consider where can I be where my competitors haven't thought to be. So if you see that your impression share is 90% for an idea, you don't have enough competition or there's not enough volume for that idea. Like there needs to be some awareness put into the mix. And if you see that your auction insights are pushing you all the way to the bottom and it's super competitive, you probably want to look at some other places. So I would definitely encourage folks that are married to Google, look for bidding on close variants, look at going after DMA location targeting if you're in the US or kind of counties, as opposed and then exclude the zip code rather than targeting the specific zip codes and getting really specific. Obviously, yes, try Microsoft, but also try Reddit. Think about LinkedIn, and specifically the influencer ad type, because that's a way to also bring a lot of humanity to your brand offering. So everything Sean said, plus be where your competition is not.
Great. Well, in part one of this episode, we already talked a lot about manual bidding versus algorithm-driven bidding, and how it has reshaped how advertisers approach campaigns and management. Now, what I would love your perspective on is how has this evolution changed both strategy, or maybe we focus more on strategy because we already talked about execution. Who wants to go, Navah?
Who wants to go? I'm nominating you. So it's really fascinating. I think the biggest strategic shift is not actually in whether you use auto bidding or not. It's in how we report on our outcomes. It tends to be really challenging for top of funnel or brand oriented buys, or however you want to position it, awareness oriented buys, to win budget because they tend not to be grounded in return on ad spend metrics, but they are undeniably part of the value and the outcomes that come from search or shopping, branded, so on and so forth. So the biggest strategic shift I would say is have conversations with your stakeholders, have conversations with your clients, and explain to them that if we only go after the very, very bottom of the funnel, there will come a point where that cohort runs out. And you are not going to be able to forever serve these people and make money at make profitable sales off of these people. We want to think about growing the cohort. So the more that we can lean into tools like demand gen, lean into tools like audience ads, lean into maybe even some exploration with negatives in place and this is another thing that's important. So not enough people use brand control or the content suitability tools. And that is really critical right now. News placements used to be kind of a no-brainer, and mobile games were I reject you on site. it's crazy right now in terms of news. Like wherever you fall on whatever side of whatever spectrum, it is crazy right now. And if you are not excluding content that is sensitive or traumatic or bad, your ad will serve next to it. I saw an ad talking about the Texas floods, and I'm not going to name who it was, but it was a B2B brand selling B2B services right on top of little girls dying to a flood. Like that's just, you don't want your ad serving there. So yes, we need to think about metrics, but we also need to have conversations with our stakeholders of, I can get you everything, but are you okay with your ad serving here? And if the answer is no, I'm going to have to hurt our profitability to protect our brand sentiment and to protect brand equity.
Yeah, I'm going to tack on to two things there. And I want to start with the concept of the Dunning-Kruger effect I like to bring in. It's basically the idea, if you have a little bit of knowledge, your confidence is super high. And if you have a lot, your confidence goes down. This happens on a daily basis. And the reason this is important is we need to focus on where the bones are buried. Like, for example, we had one scenario where we're running PMAX and the client said, PMAX is doing so much better than our non-brand campaign. Shut off the non-brand campaign. Problem is, when you go and look under the hood, Google doesn't give you all the search terms. You have to put a script in to see what's coming through. I think 80% of their terms were brand. And here's the thing. When you carve that out, brand was doing as well as the regular brand search campaign, but the non-brand that was part of PMAX actually did worse than their non-brand campaign, which I found super interesting. So when you just see a line item that says PMAX, you actually have to understand what's in there. How much of our brand terms are in there? And I'm not saying don't bid on brand. Bid on brand if competitors, are stealing your market share and things like that. But reporting is so important to understand, what am I actually looking at? And a big part of that too is data interpretation. So when you look in the UI, they have these predictive models. They even have like AI-based insights and recommendations. To me, they fall a little bit flat on their face because they don't answer the why. And I got to say, we need to understand that more than anything. It's not clicks have gone up 20% or click-through rate is better for this thing. But why is that? You figure that out. Now, all of a sudden, you have better insights that aren't AI-based. It's actually based on reality, period, full stop.
Well, I actually have an interesting question for you. If Google or Microsoft or Meta or any ad platform told you, here's why your clicks are going down, or here's why XYZ is happening, would you take that at face value?
Absolutely not. We have this process that we always give the team, and I'm a big fan of ask why 3 times, and eventually get to what's actually happening. So clicks went up 20%. Why? Oh, we changed the bidding and it's cheaper now. Okay, keep pushing. Okay, you changed the bids. What's going on? You might end up realizing that either something is broken or you're targeting different things, or the website changed, a URL was broken before. You could get into such a big list of things. You have to keep digging through. So I never trust something that spits out. I will say AI is good at starting the journey, but you need to finish it. It helps you understand where to look, but not to understand the interpretation of that data.
I apologize. I'm totally hijacking this, but
Yeah.
I find that really fascinating. So say you have that question with the conversational reporting in Google. We'll click on Google just so that it's not super loaded with me asking. And it tells you the same things that your direct report came back with, because you keep asking, okay, so this happened. Okay, why did that happen? And then it comes back and it keeps answering. Would you take that information, or would you want a human to verify it?
I'd want a human to verify it, because I don't want to get in trouble for something else that happened. There's been so many times that something else happened. Like I said, like a
Yeah.
website was down, or somebody changed a button, or a form broke, and you're sitting there saying, our cost per conversion is bad, and the ads we uploaded aren't working. But in fact, your tracking was off, or you added a cookie banner. So all of a sudden you're not tracking this. We've seen it all. So you're never going to be 100% sure, right? But at least if you get rid of some of the details that, you answer 90% of their questions, at least you can come into the room with a good answer rather than, I don't know.
Yes,
Or,
that is fair.
just accept it at face value of, this is why this is happening. And then 5 years from now, you realize that, a button was missing on the submit form,
Is that a question of mistrust? And if you have a system that, in hindsight, gave you the right answers over and over again, would you come to a point where you actually start trusting it and not ask the team to do the analysis?
It would take a lot. I think it comes down to the individual, right? I think everyone's built a little differently. Some people are order takers. Some people are critical thinkers. I think you need both. You need to be able to not just accept what's there. You have to ask, is this the end of the story? Why is this happening? If AI can get there, and I see enough cases to where it did the same thing I was going to do, I'll trust it. But it's going to have to take a lot more trials, because right now I don't think we've had enough trials with it to where I like what it's spitting out, or I trust it. I trust that it got the metrics right, but I don't trust the reason why it's saying it happened.
This goes back to what we talked about in the first part of this episode of sharing your information. So in the agentic world, I could see AI 100% answering the question in the way that you, Sean Walker, would go about solving it, because you would have conveyed how you think, what you would look for, and it would be taught and trained on your specific processes. So it would be an agent in your account managing according to your style. But, and this is a big but, that requires you passing along all of who you are and how you think into the agent. And I don't know that the average business is prepared to do that. Maybe we'll get there in that 12, 24, maybe 36-month time frame. Maybe we'll all still be sitting here saying AI is okay. But that feels like the main question, going back to the original question that we were answering of net new campaign for AI versus leaving it alone, or kind of the strategy. How much we're willing to put our own brains into AI and our personal data in is going to determine how much value we can get out of it, but also determines how much value we bring to the equation.
Yeah. And 10,000-foot view, just remember, we built the AI. Humans built it, right? So it's not like a computer built AI. I understand AI comes up with its own methods, but somebody had to program it. So the most important part, and I think even in colleges might be a good course to have if they don't have it, is how to prompt, how to interpret data, what to look for, how to train your agent. Because if you train it wrong, you're going to have a poor virtual employee. So you have to know what to look for, because even let's say you can continue on with AI, you can know what to look for, but you have to keep digging. So you can still use AI and say, I have a theory. Can you support this? Type that in. Okay, great. That sounds interesting. Let's dig further. You have to think critically in order to ask the right questions, because if you ask the wrong question, you're going to get a wrong answer.
Now, predictive modeling is one of AI's biggest promises, being able to anticipate results before they happen. But the big question is, and we just talked about trust, how much can we actually trust these forecasts? Are we seeing dependable results, or do we still need a cautious eye? And then I feel like almost, touched on this a second ago.
I want to direct folks to Mike Ryan and SMEC's brilliant analysis of demand gen data modeling, and how the numbers were flattering from Google, but the actual analysis was still great. Performance was great, but they were flattering numbers. And I think that there is a very similar effect with the predictive modeling that happened with Photoshop and people having unrealistic senses of self and image, that we get it into our heads that we have to have perfect, amazing retargeting level conversion rates and return on ad spends for every campaign. And we associate those sorts of metrics with all stages of the funnel based off of the different modeling. Now, I will say there's two different sorts of predictive value. There's the predictive value of reporting, and there's the predictive ability to meet a stated goal. So I think where there's a lot of hope and excitement, and I'm actually pretty bullish about this. Again, feel free to take it with a grain of salt because I work at an ad platform. The ability to meet a stated goal is, I think, the next horizon with predictive modeling and targeting. The metrics themselves and how they get reported, you can make data say anything, but the ability to actually snap to business has told me this is my budget, this is what I want to get out of it. I'm going to tell you that that's realistic or unrealistic. Once we come to the compromise number, I think that's a very realistic and optimistic worldview.
Yeah. And tacking on to that, I think maybe this is a surprise for some people or not, but no data is clean. I hate to say it. You could be the top company in the world. No data is clean. You get to the point where data is 100% clean. I think the model can do a good job, but you have to do the work in order to get it clean. And then on top of that, it makes me think of when I worked at MediaCom, we had a business science guy. You know, he had his master's, he had all these amazing graphs. But what I realized from him is, wow, there's so many things to look at that people don't think about, which is politics, weather, market shifts, inflation, social media, all these things you have to keep stacking on a graph, and that can shift, right? I don't know how great these models do at all that stuff unless you're feeding this, even interest rates, you know what I mean? Where if interest rates are really good and people are investing versus buying, that could change, right? The first thing we see with budgets is marketing budgets getting cut because of some economic factor, right? That's the first thing that gets cut out. Marketing budgets need to go. Where I learned as a kid in economics, you actually need to spend to get out of that slump. And we tend to do the opposite. So all of these things go into predictive modeling. I am not, a data scientist. So, maybe somebody else could answer this question better of what system is actually looking at all these factors to give you a good answer. And I think at the end of the day, if I was going to just answer for them, is use all these things as guidance. Don't use it as, this is the rule, this is the rule of the land. You know what I mean? Use it to help you explain a story or understand data better, but don't bet your life on it. It's just supposed to help. It's not supposed to be perfect.
Now, finally, let's talk about money. Budgeting is at the core of campaign success, and AI is shifting how advertisers plan and allocate spend. So how are you seeing brands adapt their budgeting planning in light of these changes?
Yeah, so it's a bit different. It depends what vertical you're in, and it depends if you're a smaller business or bigger business. I think the one thing that's kind of happening that I've noticed is, and this kind of goes to campaign setup, is if you have smaller budgets, let's say, you can't use AI bidding as much. And you have to actually have a very streamlined, minimal campaign structure. Even, this is crazy saying this, but even just having one campaign might do the job for you versus 10 years ago, you'd have to build out 30, 40 campaigns and do long tail keywords. But for smaller advertisers, we're not seeing that work. Like, for example, I think we had a smaller client that was like a plumber or something like that. We started doing all these plumbing services near me, and concatenations with the postcode and things like that. And it fell on its face versus streamlined minimal campaign. I think we had like 2 campaigns, and that did better because the algorithm was working a little bit better. So it's kind of 2 things. Now, if you're spending $1 million a month and you feed it a bunch of data, totally different story. And then also it makes me think of retail, going back to, I think the first part of this is, if everyone is bidding the same, right? And your product is $30, right? And it costs you $10 a click, you're not going to get enough clicks to get enough sales. So you're going to have to do something like Navah said, where you got to find other places to be. Maybe you're not supposed to be on Google. Maybe you're supposed to be on Microsoft, or maybe you're supposed to be in Reddit or somewhere else where people aren't, to get your cost per click down. Because otherwise, if you're just in a pool of people doing the same thing, your return on ad spend is going to suffer from it. It's never going to work for you.
So yet again, I must say, no notes, amazing, fully agree with Sean. The thing with budgeting, and it's really tough, we don't like to invest in ourselves. For whatever reason, we have zero problem taking care of other people. We have zero problem spending on all these other things. But when it comes to spending on ourselves, it's really difficult. And I find that brands don't set aside enough budget for the learning periods and the ramp up periods of these campaigns. And so if you're planning on spending, call it $1,500 a month, thinking about a small business, or if you're thinking about spending $15,000, $20,000 a month, regardless of who you are, you probably want to build at least 20% additional budget in the first 2 to 4 weeks of the campaign, because the campaign's going to need data. And the faster you clear the learning period, the sooner you can get to the kind of normal state of play. So when you're thinking about your marketing investments, I would think in terms of quarters. And so rather than having a marketing budget that you have to spend that's going to be super audited in a 30-day period, push to have quarterly budgets so that you can move the budgets around and give yourself that grace in the beginning of the campaign. And then from there, you can do what you need to do. Now, granted, you might still need to go back to the client and the stakeholder and say, hey, listen, we're crushing it. Things are going great. Do you need me to pull things back, or am I okay to keep spending? And they'll come back to you with whatever. But the biggest thing you can do for the AI first world or the automation world, and honestly, even the manual world, is give yourself that 20% additional runway for the first 2 to 4 weeks of the campaign. And especially if you're working with a lower budget, you need to give yourself that additional budget and that additional time. So a traditional campaign is 2 to 4 weeks learning period, 6 weeks if you have a smaller budget.
Yeah. And I think you said this earlier too. Some people have budgets that are set and there's no way to change it, let's say. I will say 2 kind of scenarios. You said it before where you said only go after like a certain DMA. I'm 100% on board with that. If your budget isn't going to cover the whole country, just focus on one area. And then if your budget isn't going to cover you for the whole year, just do more quicker, because that's how these bidding systems work, is you have to feed it a lot of data really quick. So you might actually benefit, instead of spreading your budget out for the whole year, just do a test in, 90 days, right? Spend your budget in 90 days, invest in yourself, see if this works. And if it works, great. Then hey, we can continue to spend this because we're getting revenue back in. But if it doesn't work, you really have to start thinking about, is it easier, let's say in B2B, for me to just go on LinkedIn and call people, and spend time instead of money with ads? Because Steffen, we even talked about that, for doing ads for ourselves. If it's going to cost you $400 to reach out to, Mr. CEO somewhere, versus it's going to take you 10 minutes to send a personal message on LinkedIn or, virtual door knocking, you got to think about that. Not everything is going to be spend money. That works in certain scenarios, but you have to be practical if you don't have the money.
I fully agree. And there's one little thing I want to sneak in there because I know we need to wrap up soon. I can watch. I'm watching the time. Different networks will have different settings. So on Google, if you don't set any location targeting, typically the budget will go, at least if you're targeting the US, to California, Texas, Florida, New York in some order. Usually that's where it goes. And what's really interesting is that Google serves ads always in the time zone of the account instead of the user. On Microsoft, you have a choice. You can serve in either time zone, and you can actually have location targets at the ad group level instead of at the campaign level. So why that's interesting and useful is, say you have a set fixed budget. You cannot go over $500 a day. Now we're going into like marginally bigger budgets. That $500 a day split across 4 or 5 major markets is a much smaller daily budget that will probably have a tougher time hitting conversion thresholds. So that's the other thing to consider is, if you have a set budget, do you have the ability to apply that budget and to really focus your targeting in a really meaningful way? Or do you need to kind of lump everything together or make some concessions? For what it's worth, I think the average business does better when they limit their campaigns to targeting no more than one major time zone per campaign, at most 2, and not exceeding more than 12 hours of advertising time. Now, that's not to say that you can't have more and adjust, and everyone has their own mechanics, but there is a lot of value in focusing the budget on when your best people are, and potentially having more campaigns in a shared budget or a portfolio budget, rather than I have this massive behemoth campaign that doesn't know what it's doing. Unless you're leaning into AI and you're trusting the AI to do all the work, but then you're consenting with that, which is fair, to bias-free investment. There are going to be certain times and places and mechanics that you may not agree with. So there are tools that I can include for the show notes, so I'm not shamelessly plugging only Microsoft stuff. But I definitely encourage folks to think about that consideration of, can I consolidate my campaigns to get more out of that budget into an ad group oriented campaign, or do I have to have each campaign because of location or scheduling location considerations?
And you might have that data already in hand to answer these questions, right? Because, you have Google Analytics in place. You can look at, where are my customers coming from? Where do I get the best customers? So I can then focus on that region, DMA, or whatever the area is, and not go after the big pot, basically. You just got to be smart about how you approach this and how you break things down and segment things. Navah and Sean, thank you for joining me on the Performance Aware podcast and sharing your knowledge on how AI is redefining paid search strategy. Now, Navah, if people want to find out more about you and, everyone knows Microsoft, but if they want to find out what Microsoft has to offer, how can they get in touch?
Well, absolutely come hang out with me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active there. I'm also a very active member of the Women Tech SEO group, Paid Search Association, PPC Chat. Those are all phenomenal groups. I created the Microsoft Buddy X handle to be a resource for folks on X. I did something similar on Blue Sky, and I maintain the monthly column on Search Engine Journal. But I would encourage folks to also check out the monthly roundup that Microsoft puts out. Kevin Salet on our team does a really great job of rounding up all the various tools that come out. So I would definitely keep an eye out for that Product Monthly Roundup blog.
Perfect. Well, this was the first episode, part 2 of, I think, 4 episodes that we're planning on this topic. Make sure to listen to the next episodes as well. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If you like Performance Aware podcast, please subscribe to us or leave us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast application. If you want to find out more about Symphonic Digital, you can visit us at symphonicdigital.com or visit us on X at SymphonicHQ. Thanks again, and see you next time.
Performance Delivered is sponsored by Symphonic Digital. Discover audience-focused and data-driven digital marketing solutions for small and medium businesses at symphonicdigital.com.